ADHD medication can be an absolutely amazing thing. But something that I've noticed myself being on ADHD medication, in specific this dexamphetamine or Elvance, but also working with clients over the last decade with ADHD, both diagnosed and undiagnosed. Also with myself having ADHD and autism, working with autistic clients, that all the medication in the world is not going to help unless you specifically work on your health as well. And what I mean by that is that we need to have pretty okay, not perfect, but pretty okay nutrition. We need to have a good sleep routine and we need to have a good exercise plan in place. Because so many people I speak to say that, oh, the medication has had no impact. And using my own personal experience, there are studies to show the actual links with this as well when it comes to nutrition and it comes to glucose management and gut health as well. Is that if I am not on top of my nutrition, if I'm not practicing what I preach, it's like that medication is not going to touch the sides. I cannot focus, and it's just not a nice place to be. Now, there's actual information out there that talks about glucose management and the impact on ADHD. And what we have to recognize when it comes to this is that if we have poor glucose management, then how can we, like, the medication is not a miracle drug, no matter what medication you're on, what dose you're on, or anything like this. So we have to look at, and you may not be someone that wants to improve your ADHD symptoms or anything, but I know with myself is that I have to look at my blood glucose management. And when I speak to clients that I work with ADHD, is that they usually want to improve their symptoms. They want to have more control over the superpower that we have, right? So they want to work on why on those days where I'm not in control of what's going on with my ADHD, what have I done wrong? What lesson can I learn and how can I improve that? So what we have to recognize is that if we don't have good blood glucose management, blood sugar management, whatever we want to call it, and there's a lot of people talking about glucose at the moment, is that even without good medication for ADHD, whether you're medicated or not, even without ADHD, just a neurotypical person, those people that are just going to be steady with this, they're going to have fluctuations in their brain fog. They're going to have lower energy levels. They're going to be much more irritable. Now, they're things that are going to happen if you've got poor glucose management. So they're going to get the afternoon energy dips and all sorts of things. But what happens then is that glucose management is going to amplify your ADHD symptoms. And that's not a nice place to be. If you're someone that truly suffers with ADHD, it's not a nice place to be, that you want to stay on top of the way your brain functions. You want to use that as a superpower. You want to not be as irritable as you used to be before medication. So we have to get on top of that glucose management. Also, as well, a lot of ADHD medication are stimulants, and especially things like methylphenidate or amphetamines, like I take myself, lisdexamphetamine or Elvance. And so if you have poor glucose management, that could impact the way these medications are absorbed, which could potentially make them less impactful or mean that you have more side effects. We also know as well that high sugar diets can actually impact ADHD symptoms. And the reason being there is because of the impact of glucose on stress levels. Now, what happens is we have these spikes in sugar, which means that our sugar in our blood gets dumped into the bloodstream, where it has to be transported to places in order to do the job, do the work, and actually go into storage sites or be used for energy and so forth. Now, in order to do that, we have to release insulin in the pancreas to grab that glucose and take it into the cells or take it into the storage sites. Now, when we put too much glucose, too much sugar into that blood, we release too much insulin. So that high sugar level then drops down, goes way below the baseline that it was before. Now, one of the things that boosts our glucose levels, because we don't want low glucose levels, our brain functions off sugar, it functions off glucose. One of the things that boosts that is cortisol, which is a stress hormone. I'm sure that if you're watching my content, you've pretty certainly heard of cortisol. Now, this is really stressful on the body. Now, the more stress that happens, the more impactful that is on the brain, and the more cravings we then potentially get. And it's a vicious circle. We also know that insulin sensitivity. So that sensitivity of the insulin that comes out, so how much insulin we're then going to get released, is massively linked with dopamine function, which again is the thing we need to improve our ability to deal with dopamine and get dopamine levels up in the body to manage our ADHD symptoms. So the better glucose stability means better insulin sensitivity, which means more optimal dopamine activity, which potentially then improves any ADHD symptoms and potentially the treatments for any ADHD symptoms. So that's just when we look at nutrition, managing glucose levels. And then we get into the other two things that I mentioned here, sleep and exercise. Your sleep routine is crucial for improving your ADHD symptoms. So many times I know when I started my medication is that I had a couple of hours awake during the night and it was frustrating just laying there. As someone that helps people with sleep, and I have done for about 15 years now, I've had people that come to me with 20 years of insomnia just sleep through the night. Like maybe not hopefully by watching my content, but well, by watching my content, but not, you know what I mean. Anyway, those people, like we had to work on their routine, going to sleep at the same time, waking up at the same time. Your body likes routine. And we have a central body clock, that the SCN, that will tell everything that you need to start working. Every organ in our body has its own body clock or organ clock that needs to start working at a certain time. And if we're waking up one day at 6 a.m., 7 a.m., 8 a.m., 5 a.m., your body's not going to know whether it's coming or going. And the same with going to bed. It needs to know when to switch off. It needs to know when to wake up. It needs to know when to be ready to go. If not, it's just going to get mixed messages. We also know that alcohol is going to impact the body's ability to get deep, restful, restorative sleep. And having alcohol throughout the week, or any time really, is going to impact that. So we need to make sure, in order to improve our sleep, we need to make sure that we're sleeping and waking at the same time, and we're keeping alcohol levels to minimum amounts. We also know that medication for ADHD, a lot of the more common medications are stimulant medications, as I mentioned earlier. So having caffeine in there, now some people say that, in fact, that I very much, if I have caffeine, sometimes it makes me tired. But that's not a good reflection on the type of sleep you're getting when you have that caffeine, if that's what you're having to then switch off, because you're not going to get the restorative levels of sleep. Now, caffeine has a half-life of around 5 to 6 hours. Now, to get 90% of that caffeine out, you need 5 half-lives. So say 5 hours, that's 25 hours. So if you have a cup of coffee at 7 a.m., you will still have 10% of that coffee in you at 8 a.m. the next day. So we kind of start building this up and building this up and building this up. So we have to be very mindful of the timing we have of caffeine in our system, especially if you're a woman and you're on birth control pill. That can potentially, some birth control pills can double that half-life. So actually, rather than 5, 6 hours, it's 10, 12 hours. We know as well that medication timing makes a massive, massive difference when it comes to having your ADHD medication and the impact that's going to have on sleep. When I actually went through my consultations, they were telling me that it was around 5, 6 hours or maybe 8 hours maximum that I would feel the actual medication working. Now, I take my medication between 5:30 and 6 a.m. And I still notice that going on in my body between 7, 8 p.m. So that's a lot longer than the 6 to 8 hours that they were saying about. So if you're waking up at 9 a.m. and you're then seeing the medication keep you awake at 10, 11 p.m., it becomes vicious, because then you're struggling to switch off. So we need to work on these things. We need to work on balancing glucose. We need to work on our sleep routine. If we want the ADHD medication to truly work and not be going up and down on dosage and all this like for years and years on end, because we do know that there are studies that show that you can come off ADHD medication with the right interventions. Your brain can develop enough within 2 to 3 years. But a lot of people stay on it for the rest of their lives because we're not working on the other things that go on. Now, exercise as well. Exercise, if we get the right type of exercise, we can very much get the wrong type of exercise. We can be chasing that dopamine hit. We could be smashing hard workouts. We can be chasing PBs when we're running. We could be just trying to do more and more and doing ultra marathons left, right, and center, or trying to do the next high rocks, whatever it is, just chasing the dopamine. But we do know that more muscle mass means better glucose control. There's evidence, there's scientific evidence that shows that more muscle mass equals better glucose control. So therefore, as we've said earlier, better glucose control can mean that you have better ability to utilize the medication you're putting in. Even without medication, we know better glucose control is going to be meaning that you have lowered brain fog, less irritability, and better energy stabilization. We know that better glucose disposal, better like utilization. When we have a cell and we want to get that glucose into the cell, we have these GLUT4 transporters. So insulin gets released, grabs that sugar, takes it to a GLUT4 transporter, pushes it over the edge of the cell, where it's put into the cell, where it can actually be utilized for energy. Now, there are exercise-induced GLUT4 transporters, which is why when people are diabetic, they're recommended to do exercise. So we get better glucose disposal. And the other thing with exercise that people really forget about is that when we're feeling a bit wired and we want to switch off, some people just doing a bit of exercise will help them switch off. I don't recommend to people that have problems with sleep to do exercise in the evening, but for some people, very, very few people, like it may actually work. So if we really, really, really want to improve our body's ability to use ADHD as a superpower, we need to learn how we can control it. And working on your nutrition, working on your sleep, and working on your exercise is going to really, really allow you to put yourself in the best possible place in order to do that. Now, if you need support with that, then feel free to drop me a message. Let's get on a call. Let's have a chat through what services I have available. If I can just recommend you something, if you can't afford to work with me, at least I can recommend you something. But let's look at seeing how we can get your body moving forward. So you can learn to have that ADHD as your superpower and use it to your benefit. So it's a gift rather than a curse, if that's the way you may be feeling about it at the moment. So thank you for watching my content. Hopefully it's not sent you asleep. And if you've got any questions,